Hello and welcome live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Gautam Roy, and coming up in the next hour, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi meets Chinese President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the BRICS Summit. Prime Minister Modi departs for New Delhi after a successful visit to Russia. The Kazan Declaration adopted at the 16th BRICS Summit. The declaration emphasizes on reforms in global security and multilateralism. Another round of unrest erupts in Bangladesh. Protesting students demand the president's resignation. And campaigning reaches a crescendo in the United States. Donald Trump's team accuses UK's Labour Party of election interference. Well, the 16th BRICS Summit has concluded in Russia's Kazan with a BRICS declaration calling for reforms in global governance and finances. Let's take a look at what's happened first. Well, top global leaders during the 16th BRICS Summit held in Russia's Kazan held deliberations on various issues and came to positive conclusions. The theme of the summit was strengthening multilateralism for just global development and security. At the conclusion of the summit, the leaders adopted the Kazan Declaration. The partner states affirmed their commitment to the BRICS spirit of mutual respect and understanding, sovereign equality, solidarity, democracy, openness, inclusiveness, collaboration and consensus. Here's a report.
The 16th BRICS Summit in Kazan marked a pivotal moment in global diplomacy as new members joined the group for the first time since its expansion in 2023. A unified message was sent to the world, stronger, united and ready to face global challenges together. During the plenary session, Prime Minister Narendra Modi emphasized a people-centric approach to problem-solving on the global stage and stressed the importance of reformed multilateralism. He praised BRICS for its achievements, which have reshaped the global economy.
नए स्वरूप में ब्रिक्स $30 ट्रिलियन से भी ज्यादा बड़ी इकोनॉमी है। हमारे आर्थिक सहयोग को बढ़ाने में ब्रिक्स बिजनेस काउंसिल और ब्रिक्स विमेन बिजनेस अलायंस की विशेष भूमिका रही है। इस वर्ष ब्रिक्स के अंदर WTO रिफॉर्म्स, ट्रेड फैसिलिटेशन इन एग्रीकल्चर, रेजिलिएंट सप्लाई चेन्स, ई-कॉमर्स और स्पेशल इकोनॉमिक जोन को लेकर जो सहमति बनी है, उससे हमारे आर्थिक सहयोग को बल मिलेगा।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi also raised pressing concerns from economic instability to climate change and terrorism, urging BRICS to take a leadership role in guiding the world towards the right path. He highlighted the new development bank's contributions to ensuring long-term financial sustainability and emphasized the need to build stronger economic ties, especially through supporting small and medium enterprises.
हमें स्मॉल और मीडियम स्केल इंडस्ट्री के हितों पर भी फोकस करना चाहिए। मुझे खुशी है कि 2021 में भारत की अध्यक्षता के दौरान प्रस्तावित ब्रिक्स स्टार्टअप फोरम इस वर्ष लॉन्च किया जाएगा। भारत द्वारा दिया गया रेलवे रिसर्च नेटवर्क का इनिशिएटिव भी ब्रिक्स देशों के बीच लॉजिस्टिक्स और सप्लाई चेन कनेक्टिविटी बढ़ाने में अहम भूमिका निभा रहा है।
In the backdrop of ongoing conflicts in West Asia and Ukraine, Prime Minister Narendra Modi reaffirmed India's commitment to peaceful resolutions through diplomacy and dialogue. He urged BRICS members to collaborate in ensuring food, energy, health and water security while also addressing new age threats like cyber deepfakes and disinformation. What began as a convergence of diverse ideologies in BRICS is now a beacon of positive cooperation, strengthened by its newly expanded membership. With Tripti Tripathi, Tanvi Taneja for DD India.
And we'll be talking about the outcome or the essence of the BRICS Summit with a special guest as well a little later in the show. But let's also tell you what else has happened in the backdrop of the BRICS Summit. Well, the BRICS Summit in Kazan has also proved to be the backdrop of a major bilateral meeting between India and China. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and China's President Xi Jinping have had their first formal bilateral meeting after a gap of 5 years, just a day after the two sides had a breakthrough agreement on disengagement of troops on the border as the relationship had been put into reverse gear following the 2020 Galwan clashes. Here's what happened.
A much-anticipated meeting between India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping took place in Russia's Kazan on the sidelines of the 16th BRICS Summit on Wednesday. Although the two leaders last met informally in 2023 in Johannesburg on the sidelines of the previous BRICS Summit, a formal meeting between the two leaders had only taken place 5 years ago in India's Mahabalipuram. Referring to the meeting, the Indian Prime Minister posted on X, "Met President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the Kazan BRICS Summit. India-China relations are important for the people of our countries and for regional and global peace and stability. Mutual trust, mutual respect and mutual sensitivity will guide bilateral relations." The first India-China bilateral after 2019 took place just a day after an agreement between the two Asian emerging economies on disengagement at the de facto border between the two nations. A decision to come up with patrolling arrangements on the line of actual control was also announced on Tuesday, which would revert the situation on the border to how it was prior to the 2020 summer clashes between the armies of the two sides. India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri briefed the media after the meeting as to how the ties would be taken forward now.
They instructed the special representatives to meet at an early date and to continue their efforts in this regard. You may recall that Special Representative of India, Mr. Ajit Doval, who is also the National Security Advisor, and the Special Representative of the People's Republic of China, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, also a member of the Politburo, have met on the sidelines of international events, but they have not had a round of talks in the Special Representatives format since December 2019. So following today's meeting, we hope to schedule the next round of the SR's talks at an appropriate date.
The Foreign Secretary also elaborated on future course of action.
The restoration of peace and tranquility in the border areas will create space for returning us towards the path of normalization of our bilateral relations. Officials will now take the next steps to discuss enhancing strategic communication and stabilizing bilateral relations by utilizing the relevant official bilateral dialogue mechanisms, including at the level of our respective foreign ministers.
Over the last 10 years, India-China relations have been through a roller coaster ride. From the highs of President Xi's 2014 state visit to Prime Minister Modi's reciprocal China visit the next year. There were also landmark informal visits in Wuhan and Chennai. But the 2020 Galwan clash in eastern Ladakh made India not only hit the brakes, but also put relations on key fronts like investments in reverse gear. Now another shift has been made to get the relationship moving forward, which could decide the future of the fabled Asian century. Gautam Roy's report, DD India.
Okay, let's talk about this a little further. We're joined by not only my colleague Jessica Taneja from Kazan live with us, but also got our expert guests with us. We've joined by Dr. Tanvi Madan, Senior Fellow of the Brookings Institution from Washington, D.C. Good evening to you. And Professor Swaran Singh of the School of International Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University in Delhi also joins us. Jessica, let me come to you first and ask you, if I were to borrow from Chinese parlance, has this long-awaited meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi delivered a win-win result for both neighbours, or will the proof of the pudding be in the eating? Jessica, could you hear me? I think we have an issue connecting with Jessica at the moment. Let me come to you, Tanvi Madan. What do you make of...
As your report also highlights
okay, I think there was a delay.
Yes, Gautam, I can hear you. It's a step in the right...
Go ahead, Jessica.
Right, Gautam. Picking up from your report, it is important that, the BRICS Summit concludes with a meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, a bilateral meeting that hasn't taken place since the last 5 years, ever since the standoff of 2020. Well, the groundwork was laid much before the Prime Minister's arrival here at Kazan. You'd recall Foreign Secretary's briefing right before Prime Minister was to reach Russia, and the disengagement at the border, the patrolling areas, the grazing areas were reversed to what they were in 2020. But when asked about confidence-building measures and how does this movement go forward when it comes to the relationship between the two, especially resumption of trade ties, given the fact that China is one of our largest trading partners, and there is a lot of, a lot of speculation, especially in the business community, on how to resume trade, given the fact that there have been some concerns expressed in the past as well. But this particular development here at Kazan, with Foreign Secretary's emphasis on the fact that peace and tranquility on the border has enabled resumption of bilateral talks. And in fact, if you see the more than 24 military-level talks have been held between the two countries' delegations over the years. And finally, we've reached a point where at least there is a breakthrough, but treading with caution, looking at how this trust deficit will build up over the years while talks resume and more working models are introduced to continue those talks between the two nations. Well, that would certainly give us an idea on how the relationship moves forward. But for the moment, it is limited to the fact that while the conflict that we saw at the border continued, but the patrolling points agreed upon would be something. When asked about whether it also includes Demsog and Depchok, the Foreign Secretary said yes, those are also included. Those were also included in the talks. So it is a significant breakthrough, but one will have to see as to how this moves forward, especially when it comes to assurances whether those skirmishes will not particularly hamper the relationship moving forward.
Yes, well, let's hope that there aren't any future skirmishes that we have to talk about, Tanvi. Jessica, let me turn to Tanvi Madan now. Dr. Madan, what do you make of what has happened today when you compare it to the kind of checklist that you had put out on your handle earlier in terms of how fruitful has this meeting been after such a long time?
Thanks, Gautam. It's good to be with all of you. As Ms. Taneja said, I think it is a significant step. But I think as the Foreign Secretary highlighted in his press conference, he talked about it as opening the pathway for a potential restoration of normal ties. But he was very clear that both sides need to talk to walk that pathway. And so, as they say, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Some of the agreements have been reached. We don't have full details. We will need to see what exactly the agreements are to the extent that they are announced. We will need to see what the Chinese say. There was no joint statement. What does Beijing say about what their understanding of the agreement is? And then finally, we'll have to see implementation of these agreements. As Mr. Taneja alluded to, we've seen that some of this is, there's a lack of trust. And so that has to be rebuilt. And the only thing that will create that reassurance is if now these modalities are worked out, but also if there's implementation on the ground. This is just the first step. It's an important step, the disengagement, but it's just the first step in what's going to be a long journey.
Yes, certainly. What do you make of it, Professor Swaran Singh? Because the Foreign Secretary in his briefing also said that very soon there will be a meeting of the special representatives at an earliest possible date, and possibly when you talk about overall ties, even the foreign ministers of the two countries could meet within a span of even this calendar year.
Gautam, China and India have been negotiating border from late 1980s, 1988 to be specific. And that underlines the complexity of the issue of this world's largest disputed boundary between world's two largest population countries. And of course, the nature of territory is again very complicated. So first of all, it's not an easy thing. It's not a boundary dispute. It's a dispute of about 138,000 square kilometers of territories, claims and counterclaims. Now, if you look at it, China's approach to neighborhood, which is usually known as 2 steps forward and 1 step backward, it tried that with India. It hasn't worked. Then it tried that, to see who blinks first. With both armed forces deployed eyeball to eyeball in many places, India has stood firmly for 4.5 years. And India is the only example in the neighborhood which has made China to go back to the negotiating table in that sense. Now, how far and how quickly we will move, I think we have to first try to implement what is already agreed upon to achieve, first of all, disengagement and de-escalation. Then, of course, going back to about May 2020 positions, and then restore peace and tranquility chapter, which started in 1988 in that sense. So demarcation of this boundary may happen in 30, 40, 50 years, or we might just forget it, because we might think it is irrelevant to think about demarcating that boundary, which is so complicated and is pulling India and China down. So I think it's a good inflection point, but it's going to be a really, really long journey in the making. And in that sense, I think we have to see how two leaders will move forward from here. I'm not basically so excited about 2 special representatives meeting soon. They have met earlier 22 times. To me, more important is whether the two leaders had some understanding on reviving their informal summit meetings, which was the most innovative mechanisms that China and India had evolved. And I think that is something which I'm looking forward to see it revived.
Yes, the last one was in Chennai. Now, Jessica, if I could come to you again, and I think we have had to thank Tanvi. She had a previous engagement. But Jessica, have the Chinese said anything about what has transpired between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi so far?
Well, that's all we all are waiting for, Gautam. What does the Chinese MOFA has to say about the meeting between their president and our prime minister? Because it's important to note what line do they take and what details do they mention, especially about the patrolling areas and the disengagement that we talk about. Now, remember, the clashes that started was also because of the status quo that existed before the Chinese side started patrolling on areas which were particularly earmarked for India. So that friction, the resolution or the solution to that friction point is something we'd have to wait and see. And also, what are those agreements, as Tanvi was also pointing out just a short while ago? We'll have to see what exactly has China agreed to, because although the talks look significant, but we'll have to see what the Chinese side, what they put out as something that they would affirm to or commit to, because that would lay the ground for reducing the trust deficit between the two countries. While we've heard from our side that there were constructive talks, now that peace and tranquility on the border would remain, but resumption of commercial flights between the two countries and enhancing of trade ties, perhaps more Chinese investment in India. You'd recall the economic survey just earlier this year. It had mentioned China almost 36 times, and their investment would be crucial in enhancing supply chains across India. And of course, the business community would greatly benefit if the trade ties are normalized. But for India, it would tread with caution, given that China has backtracked many times in the past. And there again, I would reiterate, has been a trust deficit between the two nations. And India maintaining the stance that till the time there is no peace on the border areas, trade talks or bilateral relation would not resume. But all of that has right now been taken care of. But at the same time, we'll have to wait and see on what the Chinese MOFA says exactly in terms of how we move forward after these talks, even though brief and constructive. But the operative part is what has China agreed to.
Certainly, certainly. Now, Professor Swaran Singh, in the sense that this may be in principle sort of an agreement and modalities will be worked out as things move along, because this will involve the armed forces of the two sides as well, because they're the ones who actually do the patrolling apart from paramilitary forces on the Indian side as well. But do you think that in the sense that India had made it a single point that the relationship can only move forward if the Chinese address this issue and address it effectively? It's been a win for India. India's persistence and insistence on addressing this issue first has made the Chinese cave, which is why we've had first the agreement and now the meeting in Kazan.
Really, as the military stood in those difficult situations and terrain all these 4.5 years, diplomacy sustained that standard argument that relations cannot be normal as long as border is not normal. And therefore, I think India, as I keep saying, is one unique neighbor of China which has stood up to the pressures of all kinds. And if you look at the body language and the fact that Indian Prime Minister walked into a place when President Xi Jinping was there to welcome him, if I understand, the protocol would indicate that perhaps the meeting was requested by the Chinese side in that sense, which would be an interesting thing to take then, compared to how China behaves with the most of other neighbors, including, in fact, with
So why do you think China has been so eager to, start normalizing ties with India? Does it have something to do with the kind of economic headwinds that China has been facing? It sees India, as the world sees it, as a great destination for investment and doing business with. And that has been hampered in certain spheres, although trade has blossomed still, and China has, it exports almost double the amount that India exports to China. But still, things have not been as great as they could have been.
Surely, I think there could be a whole series of explanations as to why would China be excited to sort of revive normal relations with India. And since you alluded to the economic deceleration of China in last few years, and India's economy growing at 7 and 8%, not just China, much of the countries would think of India as a good investment destination. And looking at the fact that India is likely to become third largest economy, China can easily think of investing $200 or $250 billion in India, provided India is welcoming and willing to take that in. And likewise, the trade can definitely go up to $500 billion, given the fact that both are large economies in that sense. And China understands that potential of India. And second, I think it's also the rising stature of India, the way India is welcomed now increasingly around the world, made China understand that, bullying India is not delivering, is not working on the ground. And, both sides perhaps started realizing what is called mutually hurting stalemate for a long period of time. And in that sense, I do believe that efforts must have been made on both sides. But what I'm underlining is that China's behavior with other countries, you look at how they behaved with Australia, what is called wolf warrior diplomacy. Chinese have never behaved with India in the same fashion, because I think India in that sense is the largest neighbor with its enormous potential increasing its acceptability around the world in that sense. So Chinese understand that India is not like any other neighbor of theirs, and therefore the way they have to engage with India has to be different. And India's diplomacy, foreign policy has seen also an increasingly assertive tone, whether it is on Russia versus Ukraine issue or it is in Middle East. Indian Prime Minister held a meeting with the new Iranian president, for example. So the new self-confidence of India again must have somewhere made Chinese understand that they perhaps need to evolve much more different and innovative strategy in engaging with India. And in that sense, as your report just said, we don't know the exact, details of what has been agreed on the ground, but it was good enough to have within 72 hours, two national leaders coming face to face and having a delegation level meeting and, giving a clear indication that, we are going to go back to normal relationship with special representatives meeting as soon as possible. So in that sense, I think that this is a kind of an inflection point. I understand Chinese have definitely made a major dent on the way they deal with neighbors, and India has continued to stand by the same narrative of relations not being normal as long as borders are not normal in that sense. So it could be seen as a bit of a patting our backs in that sense. But we also have to see how it moves forward, because the enormous distrust quotient that is there between China and India. I hope this moves forward as fast as from April.
I guess cautious optimism will be the byword in the coming months, at least, if not a longer period of time. And if indeed there is disengagement followed by de-escalation at the line of actual control, the de facto border, one perhaps should also wonder where all those troops, the Chinese troops that have been placed there, where will they all go? Will it be a different front? Thank you for joining me for the moment, Professor Swaran Singh, and my colleague Jessica Taneja from Kazan in Russia. Now, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi also held a bilateral meeting with Uzbekistan's President Shavkat Mirziyoyev in Kazan itself. Both the leaders discussed ways to further boost bilateral cooperation between the two countries, including trade and cultural linkages. The two leaders met on the sidelines of the summit of the BRICS grouping in the southwestern Russian city of Kazan. And still to come on DD India NewsHour, a terror attack at the Turkish aerospace headquarters in Ankara, where multiple people are reportedly dead or injured. Hashim Safedin, the top Hezbollah official widely expected to succeed slain Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, killed in an Israeli attack. And Britain and Germany sign a defence agreement, the first of its kind between Europe's two biggest spenders on defence. Welcome back. You're watching DD India NewsHour. I'm Gautam Roy. Now, Turkey has confirmed on Wednesday that a deadly attack has been carried out at the headquarters of the Turkish aerospace industries near Ankara, as the media has reported a loud explosion at the site and showed footage of gunfire being exchanged there as well. According to the Turkish government, 4 people have been killed and 14 others injured in the attack. And the local media has also said emergency services have been dispatched to the site. The cause and perpetrators of the blast and subsequent gunfire remain unclear. Amid the deadly attack, NATO head Mark Rutte said that the military alliance would stand by with its ally Turkey. Now, TUSAS is one of Turkey's most important defense and aviation companies. It produces Khan, the country's first national combat aircraft, among other projects. Former US President and 2024 presidential candidate Donald Trump's campaign has accused British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's Labour Party of blatant foreign interference in the US presidential election after its volunteers travelled to the United States to help campaign for Kamala Harris. The campaign has filed a complaint with the Federal Election Commission in Washington, D.C., calling for an immediate investigation into what it called apparent illegal foreign national contributions made by the Labour Party of the United Kingdom and accepted by Harris for president. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, travelling on a flight to Samoa, told reporters he did not expect the complaint to strain relations with Trump if he wins the election on the 5th of November, adding that Labour volunteers had gone to pretty much every US election. Now, weeks ahead of the US elections, presidential candidates Kamala Harris and Donald Trump and their campaigns are in the last leg. Harris unveiled her economic proposals, emphasizing the need for funding small businesses, and Trump held a rally in North Carolina. Here are the key highlights of the campaign trail that has been undertaken by the two leaders.
Campaigning in the United States is at its peak. All eyes are on the presidential election scheduled on November 5. With even less than 2 weeks to go, US presidential candidates Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are going loud and clear on their poll promises. With economy to social reform to healthcare, all are covered. During an interview with NBC, Vice President and Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris said she would work to bring more funds to community banks to help Latino men secure small business loans.
Absolutely. And I am saying that in terms of every walk of life of our country. I think part of what is important in this election is really not only turning the page, but closing the page and the chapter on an era that suggests that Americans are divided.
Taking a dig at opponent Kamala Harris, former US President Donald Trump called her a low IQ individual while addressing a gathering in North Carolina on Tuesday.
With 4 more years of Kamala Harris, North Carolina will be an economic wasteland. That's what's going to happen. The rest of your companies are going to move out. Everybody knows that. The smart people know. She's the only one that doesn't know it. Low IQ. She's a low IQ individual.
Backing Harris, former US President Barack Obama drew cheers from supporters at a rally in Madison. Obama is among the 18 million Americans who voted early in 2024 presidential election. Harris is the first black woman and South Asian to be selected as the presidential nominee for a major US political party.
My point is, you'd be worried if Grandpa was acting like this. Right? You'd call up your brother, you'd call up your cousins, you say, have you noticed? But this is coming from somebody who wants unchecked power. So Wisconsin, we do not need to see what an older, loonier Donald Trump looks like with no guardrails. America's ready to turn the page. We are ready for a better story, Wisconsin. We are ready for a President Kamala Harris.
Latest Ipsos poll shows Harris leading marginally by 46% to 43% over former President Donald Trump, with a tight contest between candidates. Every vote matters. Bureau Report, DD India.
And DD India's correspondent Anupal Singh is joining us live from Austin, Texas. Hi, Amrit. Clearly the focus of the two campaigns remains on the battleground and swing states, but are the two sides also doing some micro-targeting of key chunks of voters? In recent days, we've seen different demographics in the mix, ranging from blacks to Latinos for both sides.
And that's right, Gautam. Both sides are targeting groups like black voters, Arab voters, Indian Americans, Latinos. You see, yesterday both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump reached out to Latino voters because their vote is crucial. Kamala Harris trying to present herself as the first the next female president of the United States, trying to woo women voters across the divide. She's trying to woo voters who traditionally vote for the Republicans, saying that as a woman, I understand your concerns. She's going to be here in Texas on Friday, which is a red state, which traditionally has for the past 55 years voted for the Republicans, saying that about how abortion bans affect your health, how it affects your family, how it affects your mental well-being. So both candidates are doing targeted campaigning, looking at groups from where they can get voters, because it's such a tight race, such a close race that, as Wall said yesterday, when we vote, we win. So they're trying to get every voter out, not just their own supporter base, but also the base of the other party, which are voters who have traditionally voted for other parties. Gautam?
Right, and you're in Austin, Texas, not too far from the Mexican border, so I have to ask you about the issue of illegal immigration that, well, Donald Trump has been making a lot out of. It is indeed an issue, and Harris has also acknowledged that, but what do Texans themselves feel about it?
Well, it's interesting because this is a state which borders Mexico, and when illegal crossing points along the border, when they cross over illegal immigrants, it does affect the economy. Their jobs are going. So that's why we see, though the Democrats have traditionally been pro-migrants, but here Kamala Harris visited the wall and is treading soft on the issue, because it is really affecting jobs in the United States. Donald Trump is going all out, vilifying migrants, calling them that they're eating our dogs and cats, calling them murderers and rapists. We know the kind of rhetoric that he's spewing, almost bordering on venom. But Kamala Harris is too treading softly on the matter, because it is an issue with people here. For Texans, it indeed is an issue. But let me tell you something very interesting. I moved out into the countryside, and I was talking to a farmer, a typical red voter, a Republican voter. His family, he said, for generations have been voting for Republicans. So while I was walking on his farms, I saw some Mexicans, Latinos working on his farms, picking peaches and plums. And I asked him, oh, are they illegal migrants? Off camera, he agreed. And I said, I'm sure you're not paying them minimum wages, so they're working illegally. He said, yes, they are. And so I said, so the migrants work well for you? He said, yeah, but still, they are eating up on our economy. So these kind of contradictions, ironies do exist here, but it is being a red state. The Texans believe that, the walls should be raised higher, and a complete stop on crossing over illegally into U.S. Should be enforced, and that's why what Trump says cuts ice with them, Gautam.
I thought it was an established debate that migrants, no matter what kind they are, they do add value to the American economy, but since it's election season, everything remains up for debate till voting day. Thanks a lot for joining us for the moment. I'm Amritpal Singh. Now, shifting focus to West Asia, Hashim Safedi, the top Hezbollah official widely expected to be succeeding slain Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, has also been killed in an Israeli attack. Hezbollah confirmed that Safedin was killed in an Israeli airstrike. Now, he had been running Hezbollah alongside his Deputy Secretary General Naim Qasim since Nasrallah's assassination, and was expected to be formally elected as its next Secretary General, although no official announcement had yet been made. Also, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been in Riyadh now on Wednesday, and was greeted by Saudi officials and the ambassador of the United States to Saudi Arabia, Michael Ratney. He held talks with Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan. They discussed the urgent need to end the Gaza war and release all hostages held by Hamas, as well as ways of establishing security, governance and reconstruction after the conflict. Blinken also met Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the de facto Saudi ruler. Now, Britain's Defence Minister John Healey and his German counterpart Boris Pistorius signed a defence agreement on Wednesday, the first of its kind between Europe's two biggest spenders on defence, which includes a commitment to develop new deep strike weapons. The two NATO allies said the pact would strengthen their ability to cooperate and conduct exercises on the bloc's eastern flank, improving their deterrence in light of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Under the agreement, the countries will work together on developing new weapons that have a greater range and accuracy than current long-range missile systems like Storm Shadow, which Britain has given to Ukraine. And let me now bring you back to our top story, which is the BRICS Summit, the 16th BRICS Summit, where key pointers have been put out for the entire world, if not for just the BRICS nations and all the partner countries that want to come on board as well, by these leaders who were there for the BRICS Summit, including India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. We're joined by our guest, Ambassador Manjeev Puri, former senior diplomat, to talk about it. Good evening, Ambassador. What do you make of how the 16th BRICS Summit has come out to be? The West was almost in palpitations as to what will happen there in terms of what kind of an anti-Western grouping, what are they going to come up with. But just tell us, what are your impressions about how the BRICS is moving forward? It is for the greater good of everyone, particularly the global South, isn't it?
Gautam, absolutely. And I think you've said it as well as could have been said. Look, let's not look at the BRICS, now much larger than the initial 5 countries, as an anti-Western bloc. That it isn't. It is a bloc basically of emerging countries open to the global South, resonating with those ideas. It's demanding an equitable share in action in the world. In terms of contributing, it's more than willing to do its share on global issues. It calls for peace. It calls for development. It is a grouping which is basically targeting towards the good of the entire humankind. And so let's be very clear on this. This was an important summit. Let's remember that this is the first summit when the enlarged BRICS, enlarged after the Johannesburg summit of 2023, is meeting. It's also a very important summit because the Russians have invited some 25 or 30 odd countries who they think are important for this particular agenda. And from our bilateral perspective, I think there was a lot happening on the sidelines. The meeting between the Honorable Prime Minister and the President of China, quite apart from the bilateral meeting with the Russians and other bilateral meetings. All in all, a very important meeting of important leaders in the world who are really significant in setting the global agenda. And there is a need for setting up a collaborative and cooperative global agenda. It can't be what only the G7 countries wanted done. It is a need of the hour that, there is global cooperation, and the largest grouping, they cooperate with each other. So very important, and I'm happy to say a successful outcome of this Kazan summit.
Okay, I want to quickly talk about some of the key pointers in the declaration that has come out, which is about not just the BRICS grain exchange, which is quite significant, but also the BRICS cross-border payment system, the BRICS clear depository, and also on financial innovation. Now, do you think these kind of things are the ones that keep the West a bit uneasy as to, what's cooking in BRICS, apart from the fact that, there's China and Russia there together, and there's India too, and there's now so many others joining them too?
Absolutely, Gautam. Look, finance is the bulwark, isn't it, of global power. And in various ways, everyone would agree that the world was dollarized a long time back. And now the dollarization is a weapon, and it has been used in such a manner. So when the largest economies in the world, remember, the Chinese are the second largest economy. India is the 5th largest economy. When these large economies all gather together and say, we are willing to look at alternate payments mechanisms, we are willing to look at alternate mechanisms for food supply, which, by the way, is perhaps the most important thing for the global South. Remember, 2 years back, African leaders journeyed all the way to Sochi in Russia to request the Russian president's help in ensuring that Ukrainian grain was lifted, and the UN then was able to barter a deal. So, they certainly have a reason to think that, their hegemonic situation is under challenge. It isn't so. But the need and the push for an equitable and a situation which benefits the entire humankind, that certainly is getting a push forward, and the BRICS have an important role, and I'm happy to say and note that, they are fulfilling. Of course, money makes things go round, and so therefore these ideas are important. Now, one more point I want to make, where I think India has played a particularly useful and a big role in the world, which was also recognized in the G20, which is in the area of digital payments. The entire business of trying to make life easy for the common man, common woman, without having to go through the old route of the currency, yet at the same time allowing for a modicum of all of this being above board. Our experiences, I'm sure, were very valuable. Experiences with the G20 recognized, and I'm happy to say that the BRICS is also on board on digital payments and the entire scenario around the digital economy as we take things forward.
Certainly, and we would like to move things forward on the energy front as well, particularly when it comes to renewable energy and the International Solar Alliance. The Prime Minister Modi has invited every country to join it as well, and I'm sure that will happen in due course. But let's also talk about, what they've said on Ukraine, which must have been tricky to come up with that language there, since it was happening in Russia, and Russia is a key founding member of BRICS, and also about West Asia. What do you make of what these leaders had to say about these two conflicts? Excuse me.
So, Gautam, look, we are all aware that in this particular conflict, and one of them, Russia, the host itself, is in some senses a part. We know it. But we also know what other leaders, particularly Prime Minister Modi, have been saying, that this is not a time for war. We have also on the West Asian side tried to reach out to the Israelis and others and say, look, let's try and give diplomacy a chance. Please halt these particular actions, which are violent, which are resulting in deaths and so on and so forth. So, crafting, negotiating outcomes is not an easy task by no means. But, do remember the G20 had set a template. The Russians had gone along with the template. Most of the major players in the BRICS were all the major players of the BRICS were part of the G20. So, there was a starting language. And this certainly helped in their coming together. My understanding is that on the issue of both the Ukraine conflict as well as Gaza, there would not have been much, let me say, debate and acrimony. Of course, language would need to have been finessed so as to be able to take care of not, if I may say so, offending or being diametrically opposed to the ideas which the G7 and others do. But having said this, the major focus was on the economy, the issues which you raised, the financial cooperation which is possible, the solar alliance, renewable energy, each and every one of those things. And in a sense, a much more powerful and a larger voice for the global South coming together. And I think that was particularly important. Yes, and there's a collective voice for reforming global governance as well through the United Nations and other institutions. But I'm afraid we're completely out of time. So I'll have to say thank you for joining us at the moment, Ambassador Puri, but great talking to you. Now, DW's political correspondent Thomas Sparrow from Berlin is now telling me about German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's visit to India that's coming up on Thursday for intergovernmental consultations. If I could now come to you, Thomas, how important are these intergovernmental consultations?
Well, indeed, these intergovernmental consultations are important from a German perspective. They are seen as a rather exclusive, high-level format. It's a format that essentially the German government only develops with a handful of countries with which it wants to cooperate very closely. And they are relevant also because they encompass not only meetings between the heads of government, but also between the respective cabinets. And in this particular case, the German-Indian consultations have officially three main areas of discussion: innovation, sustainability and mobility. But it's clear that beyond these topics, both governments will also probably discuss some key international challenges like the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, migration or climate change. And while it's probable that both governments will want to highlight their increasing cooperation, it is also evident that in some of these challenges, some of these global challenges, and in particular when it comes to Ukraine, both countries have not always seen eye to eye.
And Thomas, the German cabinet recently adopted a key strategic document called Focus on India. Can you give us more details about this document and how would this document would be of relevance to the visit?
The German cabinet adopted this month a strategy paper which is seen or described as the base for future bilateral relations. The German government wants to raise the strategic partnership with India and expand cooperation in all sorts of areas, in areas ranging from security and defense to environmental policy to research to education, trade, agriculture. Particularly relevant for Germany is also the issue of skilled migration. The government wants India to play a central role as a source of well-qualified, skilled labour. The key objectives from the German side on this particular matter are to reduce bureaucratic hurdles, to digitize the visa process for India, and increase German language courses in India. And these are, by the way, some of the main challenges Germany has faced so far when attracting skilled workers from abroad.
All right, now protesters who had earlier demanded for the ouster of Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina are now asking for the president to quit as well. However, there is another set of protesters on the roads who are asking to curb surge in incidents of rape and violence against women. The first set of protesters demonstrated in front of Bongo Bhavan, the presidential palace in Dhaka on Tuesday, demanding the resignation of President Mohammad Shahabuddin. 5 people, including 2 journalists, were injured during a clash as joint law enforcers tried to block a group of protesters from entering the president's house while pressing for their demand. They also broke police barricades. They were protesting against the president's statement that he's got no documentary evidence to confirm the resignation of Sheikh Hasina from the post of Prime Minister of Bangladesh. A team of Bangladesh Army took position there to ensure security. Now back home, Union Minister for Education Dharmendra Pradhan delivered a plenary speech at the Australian International Education Conference in Melbourne. In Australia, Pradhan also held a bilateral meeting with his counterpart, Minister for Education, Government of Australia, Jason Clare MP. Members of the Indian delegation, heads of the universities of both countries and other dignitaries were also present at the event. Pradhan also visited South Melbourne Primary School and engaged with young learners. The Indian minister also visited the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology, a hub for technology, design and enterprise. He also went to Monash University, which has notably welcomed Indian students since the late 1960s. And Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman visited Wharton Business School in Philadelphia in the US. Lauding digital experience of India, she said that it has been a superb lesson in cutting down pilferages, fraudulent transactions and ghost account holders. This is giving us a big advantage in being responsible about taxpayers' money, she said, adding that over 51 ministries and departments in the central government deal with direct benefit transfers.
51 ministries in the central government all deal with digital direct benefit transfers. And how much would you, I don't know if anyone can make a guesstimate, nearly 450 billion rupees dollars have been transferred, dollar equivalent, have been transferred through the digital direct benefit transfer mode. And this in the last 8 years, cumulatively. So what? Big deal for me, because 40 billion US dollars have been saved from pilferage in these 8 years.
The 2024 edition of Embassy's flagship diaspora engagement event, Pravasi Parichay, was inaugurated by Ambassador Dr. Suhail Ajaz Khan on Tuesday. The week-long cultural extravaganza kick-started with a specially curated event on classical languages of India to celebrate the linguistic diversity of the country. The Indian community presented a unique play using all the 11 classical languages of India. The audience was particularly enthralled by the poetry recital in Pali and Prakrit. The Indian community in Saudi Arabia enthusiastically participated in the event. A quiz and a painting competition by women artists was also organized on this inaugural event. MOS External Affairs Kirti Vardhan Singh gave a welcome message on the occasion. The first edition of Pravasi Parichay was celebrated last year in October and November.
What is most interesting and exciting are the state days. 3 days in the Pravasi Parichay Saptah are dedicated to celebration of our various states. And I am very happy to note that almost 16 states are being represented this year from across the country. And these are the events completely owned, curated and conducted by our community. And we are very proud of our community who are celebrating our Indian culture here and who are preserving this great connect between the NRI community here and our motherland in India. I wish everyone all the best for Pravasi Parichay, and we are all looking forward to an exciting week filled with fun, joy, and camaraderie.
A panel discussion was held at Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center in Colombo on the decision to recognize Pali as a classical language. Several leading academicians in Pali and Buddhist studies from various universities in Sri Lanka participated in the panel discussion. They thanked India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi for the timely recognition of Pali as a classical language. The speakers in the discussion highlighted that India is committed towards understanding of the language as well as the teachings of Lord Buddha. The Indian Met Department on Wednesday made it clear that the cyclonic storm Dana will intensify into a severe cyclonic storm over the northwest Bay of Bengal by early morning of the 24th of October, which is tomorrow. It will cross North Odisha and West Bengal coasts between Puri and Sagar Island close to Bhitarkanika and Dhamara in Odisha. The landfall process is likely to occur from the night of the 24th of October to the morning of the 25th. The maximum speed during the landfall process is likely to be around 100 to 110 km per hour, gusting to 120 km per hour. The Indian Coast Guard is on a high alert, closely monitoring the situation and ready for any emergency. Under the influence of Cyclone Dana over the Bay of Bengal, several parts of coastal Odisha have been receiving rain today. And that's all we have for this edition of DD India News Hour, but do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. And for those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world from the DD India mobile app. It's available on both Android and iOS platforms. You can scan the QR code that's on the screen and download the app right away. And we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Gautam Roy, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.